Welcome to the Daily MBA, where business wisdom is served fresh and fast, straight from one of the top MBA programs in the world. I'll give you summaries of my lectures and readings, as well as the most important insights gained from an MBA, so you can apply all of this knowledge in every business. Let's get started. Today's episode is extremely important because we're going to start talking about the different types of markets that you can usually find in economics, but also we're going to see examples of those markets in real life. For today, we'll only start studying three types of markets, which are perfect competition, monopoly, and monopolistic competition. Then, for another episode, I'll study oligopolies because these ones are going to be seen in a wider variety in today's world, and there are going to be some small nuances. But let's start looking at each of those three that I just mentioned. I want to start with perfect competition. In perfect competition, I'm going to give an example. It's going to be coffee production or any type of agricultural production. In what are the characteristics of any perfect competition market? We can summarize them in 6. First of all, they have many small participants. Second, there's no product differentiation. And this one's going to be extremely important because if you have no product differentiation and every product is the same, that means we're talking about a perfectly elastic demand curve. Why is this? Because if everyone has the same product and you raise the price a little bit more, then someone will switch to another buyer because it's the exact same thing. There's no differentiation. So this homogeneity of product will lead to perfect elasticity. Third, you have perfect information of the prices in the market. So let's say for coffee, you already know the exact amount at which coffee is selling. So you can't try selling it for more or for less because people will know, and in the market, they'll start switching to some other competitor. Also, the fourth one is that you have no preference over one or the other. And this one may be slightly complicated when we're talking about coffee, but let's just switch to another agricultural market like wheat. In wheat, you would have no preference whatsoever over one competitor or another. And this makes it very important as well because it will lead to the perfect elasticity that we were talking about earlier. You can switch very easily from one seller to the other. The fifth characteristic is that you have free entry and exit from this market. And the final one is that these producers are price takers. And this means they can't decide their own price. They'll be biased towards the price that the market is working in. So, any agricultural market will have these characteristics. They have the same products, they have a set price, many players, and they are the price takers. So, what happens in these types of markets? Basically, quantity produced should be the one where price equals the marginal revenue, because this one is going to be a standard in this line, but also where it equals marginal cost. And this equality is the one that's going to be important, where marginal revenue equals the marginal cost. In this market, as I was talking about earlier, the demand is going to be perfectly elastic. Therefore, you're going to see it's a horizontal line, where price will equal the marginal revenue. But when we're talking about the optimal quantity, you should always produce that same amount when it crosses the marginal cost. If you produce less, it wouldn't be optimal because you're still leaving money on the table. You could earn a little bit more by producing in that intersection. But if you produce more, then it wouldn't make sense because your marginal costs are higher. And so therefore, you should never try switching to the left or to the right of the crossing, but always produce the quantity of the intersection. The profits, at this point, we don't know where they are. We don't even know if operations are going to be profitable. We just know this is the optimal quantity produced. But when we want to look at profits, we'll have to consider that they're always the revenue minus the costs. So, for studying this, we have to look at the average total cost curve or the average variable curve, which I was talking about in my previous episode. The average total cost curve is going to be U-shaped. And what I was telling you is that This one will find it because costs are going down as soon as you reach an optimal point, and then the diminishing marginal returns will start pushing it up. So you get this U shape. But then, what should you do if maybe you're not profitable? You have two options. One of them is to exit the market. But this one, exit, means that you will go out of the market in the long run. Shut down is what you would have to do in the short run. And when do you decide if it's an exit or a shutdown, or you just stay in the market? Shutdown would only happen if the marginal revenue that you chose it's going to be lower than the average variable costs. So this means your operations aren't enough for covering variable costs. If you can't cover those variable costs, then you should shut down because it's unprofitable for you to stay there. But if you are above those variable costs, even if this means that you're below total costs, you should stay there. You should stay operating in the long term because at least it's more profitable to recover your variable costs, and in the long run, you'll be able to recover your fixed costs. But this means that you should stay in the market. What happens in the equilibrium, always in economics, is that you think of the long run as the desired place or the desired equilibrium point. If many companies start to exit the market, then this is going to start pushing the price a little bit higher. Remember, because now you don't have as many producers on that market. If the price starts being higher, then it will be enough to cover your average total costs. And this would lead to the equilibrium point in this market, which is called zero profit. Zero profit would only be achieved in the long run. The only short-term decisions that you would have to make are shutdown or no shutdown. So remember, rule of thumb, if you're covering average variable costs, stay in the market. If you're not covering average variable costs, then you should exit the market. Now let's start talking about a second type of market, which is called the monopoly. Monopolies are more well-known. And the perfect example of this one may be, for example, an energy supplier or a water supplier in a specific city. Because in monopolies, you only have one firm that's supplying for the entire market. And so monopolies have 5 main characteristics. The first one is that there's only one firm. There can't be any more, just one. The second one is that usually there are high barriers to entry that market. And this may be because you need an economy of scale, because you need economies of scope, or even because of legal matters. Usually, this last one's going to be the main reason. For example, that power supply is only done by one company because governments are regulating this, or water supply is only done by one company. What happens when it's just one company, it's that this one, opposite to perfect competition, will be a price setter. So they decide the price, but the fourth characteristic would be that they are constrained by consumers. Because if prices are too high, then they will lose quantity. If they are much lower, they will gain quantity, but they won't have as much revenue. So companies have to decide which is better and what is the trade-off of selling at a high price versus selling at a low price. Because we have to know that in this market, demand is sloping down, as we saw it in our first episodes of economics. The fifth characteristic is that monopolies usually restrain trade, and that's what makes them very inefficient. And in LinkedIn, I'll upload a post where you can see that they create something called the deadweight welfare loss. And this is going to mean the sum of all the transactions that didn't take place but could have taken place if we had other competitors in the market. So basically, the people aren't getting these transactions because the price is too high, but also the monopoly is not selling it. So all of that surplus is being lost. The company's not taking that, and also the buyers are not taking it. We only have a small amount of consumer surplus and then the profit of the company, but we'll always have a loss of that welfare. This is a cost that's usually created to society by that market inefficiency. And it's kind of sad to believe that monopolies are having these inefficiencies in the market, but it's just how those types of companies operate. And what I was telling you earlier is that monopoly will choose the quantity that will satisfy always the same equation. Marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And then, after you get the quantity that satisfies that intersection, you may decide the price in the demand curve. For calculating this mathematically, you'll need lots of things. And one of them, it's calculating the marginal revenue curve. This is going to be relatively easy because this marginal revenue curve will have the same intercept as the demand curve, but the slope will be times 2 because it's 2 times as steep. So let's suppose I have my demand curve coming like this. Marginal revenue would start in the same point as the demand curve, but it will fall down twice as fast. And so now that you have the marginal revenue, you can start looking into the best amount of price and quantity to produce. And all of this mathematical process can be done in 4 easy steps. First step is to calculate the inverse demand. And this is called when you set demand not related to quantity, because usually demand equations are set Q equals something P. This one, you'll clear it up for P and you'll have price equals whatever the rest of the equation is. That's the first step. You calculate the inverse demand. Then second step is you get the marginal revenue equation, which is what I was telling you, same intercept, 2 times the slope. And then you'll equal the marginal revenue to the marginal costs. After you have that, you'll be able to clear up in the fourth step the answers for P and Q. So you'll get the price and the quantity that usually the monopoly wants to produce. Now, when it comes to pricing, you have to consider that monopolies are under the inverse elasticity rule, which means that monopolies should set its price according to the own price elasticity of demand. When demand is inelastic, you should expect to see a bigger markup because consumers are going to be less sensitive to these price changes. But as the demand curve gets more elastic, the monopoly can't charge as much because a high price will compromise many customers. So they're always going to be setting the pricing related to elasticity. And that's the important thing about monopoly pricing. The third and last market that I want to explain today, it's called Monopolistic Competition. And this one, even though it sounds related to monopoly, will have a little bit of monopoly and a little bit of perfect competition. And one good example for understanding this, it's going to be restaurants. So there are 7 characteristics for understanding monopolistic competition. The first one is that there are no transaction costs. Second one is that there are many sellers, unlike the monopoly. Third one is that you get complete information, which here wouldn't be as relevant, but still would be a characteristic of this market. Fourth one, which is also a difference from monopoly, you get free entry. Sellers can go in and out of this market when they like. Fifth thing, and this one is the main difference when looking at perfect competition, is that you get different products, heterogeneous products. And this is going to allow for product differentiation. And this leads to the 6th point, where you may see changes in price appearing because of the differentiation in the product. Lastly, all of these firms are producing substitutes. Not perfect substitutes, but there are going to be substitutes. So if you think about it, in the restaurant market, you have lots of restaurants, lots of players. All of them are probably differentiated. They're all substitutes because they're all providing you same food, but you can see differences in prices as they are giving product differentiation. And so, when looking at monopolistic competition, we can see 2 ways of getting to equilibrium. In the short-term equilibrium, it will be similar to monopolies, where you see a dead weight lost, and usually you should try to find the point where marginal costs equals marginal revenue. If you get one takeaway is that companies should always produce this quantity. Marginal cost equals marginal revenue. But the good thing is that because this market has free entry, it will start moving the demand curve. And so, eventually, in the long-term equilibrium, it will start shifting until you get to the average total cost curve, and that same intersection is going to be the one presented with marginal costs, marginal revenue, and demand. So here, everything will add up to also have zero profit, just like perfect competition, but it would be looking a bit more like a monopoly. Here, there's no welfare loss. I hope all of this helps you realize all of the types of markets that you can find in today's world, and next time we'll study oligopolies, which are going to be only a few players that are controlling the entire market. I'll see you next time.